Thanks everyone for joining us today for a little bit of a conversation about Anvil X, a way to do more with your Tableau dashboards using just Python. So my name is Dan Bolinson. I'm a senior manager with our industry advisor group. I've been with Baker Tilly since 2015, and most of my focus is working with clients in the manufacturing and distribution space, helping them make better decisions with data. And so much of the time we're working on like one-off projects, be it merger and acquisition or capital expenditure type projects. We also do a lot of work in like the more business as usual type programs in helping integrate data into decision-making processes, both more strategic and tactical. And that's really what we wanted to talk a little bit about today, is some of the different tools that we find useful in deploying technologies into decision-making processes, specifically those where we're using Tableau. In general, as I said, all of our work is helping people make better decisions with data. And so we do find ourselves using Tableau and Power BI sometimes a lot as well. And that's just because those are just such great platforms for communicating information that's grounded in what can be an overwhelming amount of information and data. So to take a little bit of a step back first, I wanted to talk a little bit about internal tooling. Looking back, not so long ago, there was a real drive to get organizations onto one single ERP, one single source of truth, get everything under one umbrella. And from there, that was, from a governance perspective and for other reasons, that was seen as the best way forward for organizations. But, over time, I think what we found is that certain tools are good at certain jobs. And so we are starting to see most of our clients have a fairly wide plethora of applications that are in play. They've got an ERP, they've also got a WMS, a TMS, a CRM. There's inventory management tools. Some of these are off the shelf, some of these are homegrown. There's just a lot of different tools that are out there that are very good at one specific thing. And I think that from the reason that we're seeing that is just because ERPs are great at what ERPs are great at, but other tools can sometimes be more specific to a function and be more useful in that function. Now that has created gaps both between those tools and also just in those use cases where an organization either hasn't justified a full-blown project, a full-blown system for that use case, or in instances where you've got to combine information from these different tools, or you've got to like find ways to patch these quilts together. And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of rapid application development. And I'm sure everyone can think of 10 different low code or pro code application development tools, really trying to put these types of solutions into the hands of the business users. I mean, I think at the end of the day, to displace what's in many cases Excel. So when people are finding solutions in Excel, there's all sorts of governance and other issues related to that. And so when people are able to build more formalized tooling, that's helping move the organization in a longer term direction, while at the same time still putting the tools in the hands of the people who are facing the problem and can understand it well enough to solve it. And so, we definitely agree and believe that putting these types of tools into the hands of people to build their own solutions makes a lot of sense. And now that kind of raises this question of like, well, do we take the no code approach? Or is there like a low code solution or more of a pro code solution? And, this is a broad spectrum. You can imagine where a lot of your probably favorite tools fall on the spectrum. Certainly from a no code perspective, it's the lowest barrier to entry. A lot of the graphical user interfaces, be it, things like an Alteryx or a workflow development program like that make a lot of sense and are really, you can put that in the hands of people pretty quickly. But oftentimes those lack flexibility, and you can hit the limits of those tools pretty quickly too. Where the pro code tools with that steeper barrier to entry really do kind of give you a little bit more flexibility, or more unlikely to hit the edges of that tool as you're developing applications specific to what you're trying to do. And so for us, the tool that we're using most often when we're approaching these types of business applications is a tool called Anvil. This is a pure Python web app development framework. It's definitely a code-first solution. It's Python on the front end and the back end, which is Python in the browser is a little unusual. but is a very, very nice solution for us. Our team is primarily data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, and so we've got a very strong Python background in-house, and this tool has really allowed us to develop out more of these applications without needing to invest in like a front-end development team, and that's been very, very useful for us. Certainly from the front-end perspective, Anvil provides a drag and drop interface, which we'll dive in a little bit too. And so we can build applications really, really quickly. And the Python on the back end lets us integrate with the applications we need and to program logic that is, just a few lines of code to do what we need to do. And so, as I look back at this, it's definitely on the pro code side, but by virtue of having that graphic user interface for the purposes of building a front end, it really, I think, solves the challenge and reduces that barrier to entry on this. And so Anvil's what powers Anvil X, which is really what we're here to talk about today. So Anvil X is a way to build out extensions in Tableau using just Python. And so again, Tableau is a dashboarding tool, and Anvil X lets you do more with those dashboards that you've built in Tableau. The way that we're doing this is using a framework that Tableau offers called Tableau Extensions. And so Tableau Extensions exposes a lot of different handles to the Tableau dashboard that we can then use Anvil X to connect to. And that's allowing us to really take advantage of those capabilities that Tableau Extension offers to do kind of whatever we want with our extensions. And so that really has been the key for us in building out business applications within sort of the four walls of Tableau. At the end of the day, our perspective is that the best Tableau dashboards help give people insight to make better decisions, but the best Tableau dashboards with extensions let people take action right from that dashboard. And so for us, that's really, really exciting. For a long time, as we were building out these Tableau dashboards, we were really, really pleased with the insight that people were able to get from it, but that was always leading them to go do something somewhere else. And so by being able to extend our dashboards using this framework, it's nice to be able to kind of keep it all within these four walls and to build out how these Tableau dashboards kind of become more deeply integrated into the decision-making processes that, again, we're trying to inform with the data that we're delivering and the information that we're delivering. So to touch just a little bit deeper on what Tableau dashboard extensions are, these are web applications that have two-way communication with the dashboard. And there's a Tableau extension API. It's a JavaScript API that Tableau has offered. And so what Anvil X does is it leverages this API for us to be able to build Tableau extensions in just Python. Again, so for us, that's allowed us to lower the barrier to entry such that we're able to build data products in Tableau using this with just the skills we have today, which is primarily Python. Some of you may have heard of embedding, and I did want to touch base on this really quickly. So the basic premise behind embedding is that you're building a Tableau extension into a website, be it like a customer portal or something like that. And this is an example of that. We have a dynamic costing initiative, which helps primarily manufacturers deal with rising costs of inputs due to inflation to help understand how that's going to affect their bottom line and eventually flows through to pricing. And so we offer this through this dashboard portal here. And we got a home page, we've got different pages here, and we've got dashboards down here that basically let us see how these cost increases are flowing through to our finished goods. And what we are looking at here on the right is Tableau. So this is a Tableau workbook using embedding that's inside of our portal. And it behaves just like a Tableau workbook. We get all of our filtering and sorting and the ability to hover over to see what's going on. And so again, this is an embedded Tableau workbook inside of our portal. Now extensions flip this on their head a little bit. So if I look at material cost forecasting, this is going to load a dashboard where we are allowing users to basically input raw material prices to build a specific forecast for what they think might occur, to then again deliver the insight in terms of what their what they need to do to maintain a neutral bottom line or otherwise flow through to customers. And so in this case, what's loaded on the right here is Anvil X, which is an extension. And so when we're then clicking on, for example, RM 1008, it's loading the current price, and we can just go directly ahead to update that. And we can save that back, and that's going to then update the underlying data, right, again, from our Tableau dashboard. So you see that as I'm making selections here, this is responding to those selections and being updated. And so this is kind of a baked example of embedding plus extensions to really build a full data product using the frameworks that we're talking about today. As you're thinking about Anvil X and Tableau extensions, I think that there's a range of use cases that usually jump out to folks, and are the folks that are the use cases that we see most often integrated. Integrating with third-party APIs is a big one. That's like being able to write back data to a different data source, or to pull in data from something that's not directly in the Tableau dashboard, but it's related in some way. Building business processes right into the dashboards, huge. That's core to this idea of taking action from within the dashboard, and oftentimes like building front ends to models like data science models or otherwise, where you're parameterizing something that's generating output into the Tableau workbook that you want to be able to manipulate in some way that is sort of outside what you'd be able to do in core Tableau. You can kind of extend that and augment that a little bit with Anvil X. And so there's really a huge range of use cases. We'll give a couple of examples, but it's pretty powerful, and I think with that power comes a lot of opportunities. In terms of some of the key takeaways that I'd like to leave folks with today in terms of Anvil X, I mean, first, it is a pure Python full stack development. So I mentioned earlier that extensions are web applications, and that's really what makes this work, is the fact that Anvil provides the ability to generate full stack applications quickly and with just Python. Provides a modern development experience, and so some of what that means is real-time logging and real-time and like detailed tracebacks. We'll see examples of this. Enterprise-ready user management, so whatever your SSO solution is, it'll plug into that and can leverage that. Similarly, I know that a lot of organizations have a challenge with Tableau extensions that are hosted by other third parties. And so that's where Anvil X can be deployed on a private cloud. It can be deployed on-prem. And then that application is being served from within you in your infrastructure by you, and such that you're never like transmitting data externally. And so that's a important factor for a lot of security from a lot of the security groups' perspective. There's also core to this is the ability to deploy an application with one click. So that's really powerful. Once your team's got this on board, then getting going and incrementing the use cases that are in play is really rapid. And there's just extensive resources that are out there to get started. And that includes the resources that we'd like to make available to you. We offer support packages for this and training packages for this. So please do reach out if that's of interest. So I'll dive a little bit into use cases. One of the first use cases that we wanted to pull up, because it's one of the first use cases that we sort of landed on, was a Tableau dashboard we had where we were managing a sales team and the updating of their opportunities within Salesforce. And so this is a dashboard that we had in play, and we've got a bunch of opportunities here, some of which are overdue, which is to say they are open opportunities, but the close date has passed, so something's clearly stale there. We also have some opportunities that are expected to close in 30 days or in 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months. And there's certain business rules here that say, like, if you've got an opportunity that's closing in the next month, but you haven't updated that in at least the last week, then there's probably there's an update needed. There's some attention that's needed on that dashboard. And so fundamentally, this, nobody wants to see red on their dashboards. And so this was meant to try to steer attention of the sales organization in terms of what are the opportunities that probably need some love? Who are the customers that they should be reaching out to see if these opportunities are on track to close as expected? And so the original workflow here was that we would try to uncover this type of information and direct people to the dashboards that they, the opportunities that needed updating. And they'd have to go to Salesforce and go do that. And so what this has allowed us to do now with Anvil X is when we click on one of these opportunities, this extension on the right here is going to pull in additional data from Salesforce using their REST API and is going to give us the ability to make changes directly to this. So we might want to add a task or record an event that's upcoming, or we could just potentially, if this was closed lost, we can update that opportunity from here, save that, and that's actually going to go and write directly back to Salesforce so that we can keep track of when that what's going on with that opportunity. And so we don't need to leave this dashboard. That save has already been made. We can go ahead and refresh that data, and once that's loaded, it will show this is this opportunity has been updated, and we no longer need to look at that. There we go. It's gone green. Another common use case and a use case that I think that we often use as sort of the first entry point for teams is the ability to have a conversation directly within a dashboard. That's really, really valuable for folks. When you're trying to drive that type of engagement, it's useful to be able to actually have a record of what was going on. And so, this is a Salesforce or a Sales Superstore data, which is one of the standard out of the box Tableau dashboards, but we've added here the ability to have a little bit of a conversation about that as profitability is going on. And I think it's just a little bit of a low stakes example, but it really does sort of show how we can start to augment our Tableau dashboards by building in some of these other features that just don't kind of come with stock Tableau. We provided the Salesforce example. Another example that we've worked on recently in two cases has been like flagging information or kind of requiring explanation. So one example, we work with a medical device manufacturer, and they work in obviously a pretty regulated environment. So their sales organization is restricted in terms of what they are allowed to do as they're pursuing opportunities. That includes things like meal limits when they're visiting doctors' offices, or things like what kind of conversations are often they're allowed to have those conversations. And they're required to keep very close tabs on that. And so we worked with them to build a couple of dashboards that uncovered sort of when this type of behavior was occurring that was prohibited. And started to shine a bright light on specific instances where that was occurring, and kind of created a problem because now the organization was very, very aware when these instances were occurring, and the dashboard provided that insight right away. So they're then obligated to do something about it. And the dashboard, the Anvil X solution that we deployed there allowed them basically similar to the ability to have a conversation, but to like manage a workflow. So that as a transaction had been flagged for further pursuit, it needed, they could sort of see how that transaction worked through that workflow of, being under review, and then resolution being like, hey, in this case, it was actually fine for these reasons, or else we had to take remediation steps, be it training or something like that. And here's the evidence of the steps that we took. And the other example is a manufacturing variance example. And this was actually one that we wanted to look at live today. So here is an example of a variance dashboard. This shows a manufacturing company that's keeping track of their material burden and labor variances over the course of the year. And we see that month over month, we can see kind of where those key variances are occurring. So, for the month of February, we had a total negative $11,000 variance on our burden. And if we click on here, we can sort of see from a tornado graph down below which are the part numbers that were specifically contributing to this variance. And so with that in mind, again, we have now identified when this type of variance is occurring, but we don't really know why. And this is, I think something that probably you've all experienced. Like once you've got the insight for something going on, you want to kind of know why. And that's where we want to start augmenting the data. In this case, what we want to do is be able to keep track of an explanation for that variance. So the workflow here in practice was this would be released on a monthly basis, and it would go back to the shop superintendents, who would then need to develop an explanation for what was going on. And previously, this was done sort of by combination of email and Excel, but ultimately it was a challenge to then sort of say, hey, over time, what are the key drivers of variance? And if I want to know, in the last 12 months, give me a Pareto of the reasons for the reasons that my labor was over or under. That type of information just wasn't available. So if they needed to go get it became an exercise. And so what we worked with them on here was, let's take this and create a way to have people explain variance. And we'll do that live here. I'm going to first pull up Anvil X. So this is using their free version. The Anvil X is free on Tableau Desktop. So give it a try. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to create a new app, and I'm going to create a Tableau extension. And this here is the kind of the main development environment for all of our Tableau extensions in Anvil X. On the left, I can see all of the different key tools that I might use. So I've got my application, I've got some data, settings, and these are all kind of the configuration of my application. And over here, I've got what's actually in this application. Specifically, I've got a home page here, and this home page comes kind of preloaded with a bunch of functions that's going to help me understand what's going on in this Tableau extension and becomes sort of a starting point for us to build something useful. I can see a front end here, and behind this is code, which is driving all of the logic of this extension. So in this case, let's start fresh, and we'll say we want to build a variance explainer. So what I'm going to do is take from my toolbox over here, which is just all of the different things I can build my UI with. I will drag a label, and I'll say down here that my text on this label is going to be variance explainer. And I might want to make that a bit bigger. So I'm starting now to build out a front end, and you can see that I might be adding buttons. In this case, we're going to want to add a field for them to actually record the explanation. And we want to give a button to save that explanation when it's done. So I've now got a front end that's been developed. Again, you see it's drag and drop, so it's easy to get started. And we haven't wired anything up, so we don't expect this to do anything yet, but let's try it in Tableau. So when I'm ready to do that, in the top here, we have this Test in Tableau button. And when I click on this, it's going to give me the option, I'm running in Tableau Desktop right now, to download a manifest file. So this manifest file is just a lightweight XML document that's going to tell Tableau, hey, there's a web app out there, and we should use that as an extension, which exposes, certain aspects of the dashboard to that. So that's sort of the first layer of defense in terms of making sure that there's secure applications being developed and run in Tableau. As I mentioned earlier, most folks in an enterprise context are self-serving their Anvil applications. So where I've logged into Anvil.works is using their SaaS solution. That's probably inappropriate in many enterprise contexts, but certainly a good way to get going. And that's sort of a choice. Once you've got an enterprise instance stood up, then you can grant access at your Tableau level to that. And so there's sort of multiple layers there to make sure your information is secure and that all of this is aligned. So I've dragged extension into the workbook, and I now see that UI that we've generated. It is a dashboard object, so I can kind of resize it and format it the way I need to. And we see that we are, we've got this extension in. And so as I start to click around, if I go back to Anvil, I'm going to see, let's see. Right. Click on merge. Here we go. So we're getting Tableau output into our ribbon. And so Tableau output is telling us what's going on in our dashboard. If I look at code, I see specifically that out of the box, this has come with some event handlers for selection changed, filter changed, and parameter changed. And what's going on here is that I'm getting my dashboard and I'm starting to create event handlers that will do something when something on that dashboard occurs. And that's kind of the basic, most of these Tableau extensions kind of operate on that basic idea. Something's going on the dashboard, so we're going to respond. And that response might be exposing somebody to a UI, where in this case, for example, we want them to be able to make a comment. Or it might be to go get information from somewhere else, or whatever that might be. This get dashboard is coming from the T-Rex jacket, which is a wrapper over the JavaScript API that I mentioned earlier. It's documented here, and this is where you can get at all of the details of the API. So if you want to know exactly what's going on, if you want to understand exactly what are the events that you can respond to, there's just a ton of information in here to help a team get started and to give a little bit more detail into what's really taking place on this in Anvil X. As we saw here, we already had our dashboard.register event handler, but once we have that dashboard, it's just a Python object. And so that's kind of a core idea in Anvil as well. We're dealing with Python objects. And so if I want to, for example, say, hey, self.dashboard, I can start to see all of the methods and attributes that are available to me. And so if I want to go get a data source, for example, I can do that. I can get my worksheets by name if I need to get my worksheets. I can set filters, clear filters, really any of that interactivity I need to enable between my extension and my dashboard is going to be enabled through this. So, and if I wanted to know more about that, I can come to the documentation and see exactly the API reference to see what are the different classes or objects that I can work with and what are the things that I can do with them. In this case, we see we already have our selection changed event handler. And so if we go to our callback here, we see that we're literally just getting the worksheet, printing the worksheet name and the worksheet selected marks. So we see down here what's going on. Our worksheet variance by month had the following mark selected, and it's telling us what that is. So in this case, what we want to do is allow people to make a comment specific to the month. So we've got our month of close date here, and we're keeping track. And this was, I selected on burden. So that's the specific, I would be recording something to do with burden if I was to make a comment here. In this case, our objective is to keep track of an explanation for why that variance was occurring. And so if I come to data here, this is the Anvil data tables. And this is a very, very powerful part of the Anvil X solution in that it allows you to define and persist data as required by your extension. So when we're talking about taking a dashboard and adding behavior or extending that in some way, it's very often the case that we're trying to supplement or augment the behavior. And that's often done through implementing or through layering in new data. In this case, we can add a new table, and specifically we want to keep track of the explanations that someone might have for variance. So we'll create an explanations table. We'll keep track of the explanation. We want to keep track of the month, which is, in this case, coming in as a number. And we want to keep track of like what type of variance that was. So let's say variance type. I've got my table defined now. I've got my UI defined now. And really the next step is to wire this up and to combine them. So in this case, really what I want to do is when somebody clicks save, I want to pull up that, I want to take that explanation and log it. So we'll go ahead and do that. When I double click on this button, it's going to create a new function, which just like we saw earlier, it's an event handler, which is to say there is a Python function being called. And I just want to emphasize this because it might feel like a lot, but it's, you know, a button is clicked and a Python function gets called is really, that's all that's happening here. And so in this case, we want to get the selection. So we'll say our data is from our dashboard. And we are specifically working with the worksheet. Let's pull this up again. Variance by month. So we'll pull that in. And we want to get the data in that worksheet, the selected data specifically. So we'll say get selected marks. And this is going to come back as a list of Python dictionaries. So if I had selected 10 different things, it'd be a list of 10 different things. I'm just going to take the first one. And we can now use that information to save our explanation. And we'll use the app tables, which is to say those tables we just defined. We can get explanations. And we're going to add a row with our month, which is our data. Come back down here. It's going to be our month of our close date. Our variance type is going to be the measure name, which is going to be var burden in this case. And we need to get our explanation, which we'll take from that text area that we defined. Again, everything's a Python function, so I can just grab it from the attribute of the form. Now, I do actually have to make this writable from client side, which is not a great idea in production, but is great for this demo. And then we will reload this. Anytime we make a change, we'll need to reload our extension. And let's say we're explaining the negative variance we had on our burden rate in April. And we might say this was due to higher electricity costs. I click save here. I'm going to be able to come back to our data table and refresh. We've now captured that data. So that's great. We've persisted this data. Now the next step is to tie this back to Tableau. And this is a data table that we can just connect Tableau directly to. So when we're talking about layering in data, that's what we're talking about. We'll come to Anvil X here, and we can see that we can access our data tables from Tableau. We can go ahead and just do a new data source, and it is a Postgres database. So we'll connect to Postgres, and we can copy in our information into here. Sign in. Great. And we'll use our explanations table. And we can see the information that we captured from our UI. So I hope you're starting to see the building blocks here. We've got an extension that's with a couple of lines of code interacting in with our Tableau extension workbook in all Python. And we've defined a data table that we can then start to record that additional information that's going to let us enrich this dashboard. And we're ready to kind of do more with that in Tableau. I'm going to pull up sort of the final version of this just for the sake of time. So what we've got here is that same workbook. We have the reasons for variance here. And we see in a couple of cases what I've already done. So in this case, we said that in April, the electricity costs had spiked, and these are now colored not by the material or burden, but they're now colored by whether there's an explanation. So if I look back in February, there's no explanation, so it's still red. In April, it's blue because we've got an explanation from our shop floor. Similarly, in July, we've got that explanation too. And so this is kind of the foundation of the solution we built with this client. It's, this is still pretty high level, but it's closing the loop of us being able to identify a variance, start to understand like why that variance is occurring. And we are now set up that over time, as things start to reoccur, or we'll start to define specific categories, that lets us really understand on a rolling basis what's driving this. And so it's a pretty powerful tool as we do start to kind of provide this ability to do more with our dashboards and to write back and to augment the behavior here with additional data that's being generated by this extension. So in terms of how to get started, as I said, you can get started right now at Anvil.works X. As you're thinking about this, either for yourself or for your team, I'd really, I would challenge somebody who had been exposed to Python maybe in college to try it out. I really think that the barrier to entry here is low enough that someone who's got some exposure to Python is going to be able to get started and really start to do some cool stuff. It also, if you've got somebody who's really, a Tableau pro, I think there's a real opportunity here for folks in those shoes to be looking for the next thing to keep their own personal development and personal growth going. And I think that this just opens up a whole new way for them to use Tableau. I think they'd also be pretty excited about that if they're maybe their learning starting to stagnate just because they've hit the limits of what Tableau can do. This is really, they'll both have the understanding of Tableau and the understanding of the business processes to really get creative about how this can do more to help the organizations. Anvil.works it's free forever if you're doing it just in desktop. If you do want to deploy through to your server, to your online Tableau cloud instance, that's possible too. And that's the licensing terms are on Anvil.works for how that works. If you want enterprise, there's a free trial available for that too. And it can be spun up either on your private cloud or on-prem to try it out. I'll point out again the documentation's at T-Rex Jacket. You can also just get links to that from Anvil.works X. Pull that up. You can see, get some more information high level here and get routed to the documentation. And finally, don't go alone. There's an Anvil user group that also does cover Anvil X topics. And they meet about once every 6 weeks. And so you can, either you or your team can join that user group to sort of see how other people are using this type of solution and to keep the focus on learning. In terms of how we can help, we would love to work with you on site, both to help you or your dev team kind of get over that initial learning curve. There's no alternative to doing it. And so we really enjoy getting in a room with folks and let's build a chat extension together. Let's build the extension we covered today on variance explanation together. All of these, just getting your hands dirty a little bit with this, I think helps understand what's possible and helps understand too what is the size of that learning curve overall and based on where people are starting from. And we'd be, more than happy to do that. It's something we do as, for free. That's just something we enjoy doing. We're also really happy to help develop a vision and roadmap for Anvil X and Anvil in your organization. I started this conversation with discussion about internal tools, and that's, I think that's what this is all about. It's how do we deploy this solution to create great internal tools in a way that makes sense for you, for your development team, and for your citizen developers and all. Some of what we didn't cover with Anvil X is how you can develop as a team. I'll just say that if that's of interest or you want to learn more, reach out. But Anvil all of these Anvil applications we're developing are Git repositories. So what that means is that they'll plug directly into the version control system you're probably already using today, be it GitHub or something like that. And so, that's good. That's going to really be powerful as you're starting to look to deploy this and need to govern it, basically. We also do training for Anvil X and for Anvil, including, secure development practices in Anvil, especially around user management and deploying secure applications. A lot of best practices in terms of how do you architect this stuff and how do you do this in a way that, how do you roll out standards in an organization so that, your applications are pretty consistent and maintainable over the long run. And how do you develop as a team? So how do you leverage VCS and review processes in a way that makes sense? And so, we can do that ad hoc. We also do offer support packages, annual support packages, ranging from like, we'll get right in there with you to build stuff to like, hey, we'll just be a helpline if you get stuck, don't spin your wheels. And you can learn more about how we can help specifically at this link here. So we are approaching time. We'll maybe take a couple of questions in the chat as we're wrapping up here, but really do appreciate time that you all spent with us here today. So thanks a lot, and I hope to hear from you soon. So I'll close out, and thanks again.